Representatives Oliver, Evans, and Nguyen with us. Also, Senator Tarrant will be joining us. So our special gratitude to them for giving their time and being with us this evening. But really, I'm grateful to everybody for taking time to be a part of this. This is a wonderful tradition here at Glenn that I was talking with Susan earlier, trying to sort out how long, probably 20 years or so that this event has been taking place, that Glenn has been sponsoring this moment with our representatives and state senator, and that's wonderful. And so it shows really the dedication to the community of this church, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that our church connects with this community in such a meaningful way and offers this opportunity to hear from our representatives and to ask and share questions with them. So I don't want to keep us waiting here. I'm going to ask Carol Allums, who leads our group that engages with the world around us in the church. Carol will welcome us a bit farther and introduce our speakers in more depth.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. As we begin, I'd like to remind everybody to mute yourself, except of course for our speakers. And if you have questions, I'd ask you to keep them till the end. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end to answer some of those questions. I'm really glad that we're all here tonight and that we have this wonderful tradition at Glenn. The laws that are passed by our legislature directly impact the lives of Georgians. Laws can foster justice and equity, or they can lead to greater inequity. They can increase access to things like healthcare, or they can limit access. They can make us safer through gun safety laws, or they can make us less safe by restricting gun safety. They can protect the right to vote, or they can make it harder to vote. They can support strengthening our educational systems or seek to limit what gets taught in the classroom. And that's why conversations like this with our legislators are so important. They provide us with the knowledge that we need to understand how we can most effectively participate in our state's political process. So we're very glad to welcome our speakers for tonight and are grateful for their time with us and for the work that they do in the legislature. I'd like to first welcome Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, who represents House District 82, and to thank her for the many, many years that she has been joining us for this update. Second, we welcome Senator Elena Parent, representing Senate District 42. And then we welcome back to this event Representative Becky Evans from House District 83. And finally, we welcome Representative Bee Nguyen, who currently represents House District 89 and is currently running to be Georgia's next Secretary of State. Each of our speakers will take about 10 minutes to provide us with an update on the current session. And I know that we're looking forward to hearing what all of you all have to say, and I will let you decide for yourselves who should go first.
Thank you. Representative Oliver, would you like to go first, or you want me to go first? I've been texting with the Senator Parent and Representative Nguyen.
I'm happy to go first, and I'm going to hope the dog doesn't bark. I usually get some help from book club members and Glenn Church members who will come over sometimes and babysit when I'm doing the political rewind program, because the dog is terrible about barking. But we'll give it a try. I'm feeding him treats right now. I think what I would like to begin by saying it's an unusual session in several ways. One, it's an unusual session in that it's a unusual political year. Georgia, again, is very much in the national political spotlight. We have, I've never seen this in a long political career, we have a sitting governor challenged in his primary by a very prominent candidate. And we, with Senator Warnock's election, still Georgia controls power in the Senate. There will be, in this complicated political year with unlimited money, there will be unlimited money for all for the gubernatorial and Senate races. There might not be, Nguyen might suggest that there won't be unlimited money for Secretary of State statewide races or other down, but there will be unlimited money, and Georgia will be again in the national spotlight. Governor Kemp, secondly, is sitting on the largest pot of reserves of money I've ever seen. It's a $3 billion reserve. I don't think I've ever seen even a $2 billion reserve. And that does not count the unspent COVID Rescue Act, ARPA money from the federal government in relation to support during the pandemic. There's probably, I'm not exactly sure, although I've been following this and pestering leadership with questions. I'm not exactly sure whether there's closer to $1 billion left of unspent federal money or closer to $2 billion. Yesterday, the governor released by press release his decision to use $418 million on completing broadband extension to rural Georgia. And it was a very interesting list. I think because I know a little bit about how there's been a GIS mapping of unserved broadband, unserved communities across Georgia that don't have broadband. There's a very sophisticated thing that's gone on about a map. We have been intensely involved in that map in a couple of bills from last year. And it's an accurate map, I think. The distribution of $418 million has a good chance of solving the lack of broadband in rural areas. And I would say that is a very good use of federal COVID CARES money, very good benefit for the taxpayers of Georgia. It's not coming to DeKalb County, it's not coming to Fulton, but it's an example of Governor Kemp waiting as he's pacing out his campaign political year, waiting to release these monies in large spots, which he has the opportunity and a right to do under the way the federal money is distributed. He presented a budget to us last week, 2 weeks ago, lost a little bit of track, which showed his spending to give teachers $5,000 raises, complete that, but also give every other state employee raises. And I have been fascinated with the number of state employees, high percentage, I'm surprised. The employees in the state psychiatric hospital, 62% of those employees make less than $30,000 a year. So for a $5,000 increase to come to an employee making $9 an hour or less than $30,000, that's a huge economic benefit, and that money will go back into the state's economy. Those are very, very positive things. I want to talk about the mental health bill, which is a major focus of my effort, but I'm going to mute myself right now and take the dog and lock him up somewhere. And Becky, come back to me at some point when I've got the rest of my 10 minutes, because I've got to do something about this dog. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Oliver. And yes, we're so excited about the mental health reform bill. She'll be talking about that. I'll just talk a little bit more about our state budget. She's told you, so this is a year where we do have our economy has done better than expected. And so we had 2 years of austerity cuts during the pandemic, and now we find ourselves with our reserves completely full. And so we're having an 11% increase over last year's budget. So we do have the $5,000 pay increase, which, as Representative Oliver said, is for many state employees, that's a big boost. We have $2,000 pay increases for our teachers, which is, we gave them $3,000 pay increases in 2019. And so I do think that's a good sign of us showing, how much we appreciate our teachers. One thing that I think you all know this, but the budget is the only bill that we have to pass every year, and it is a moral document. It shows where our priorities are, and Georgia does spend the bulk of our budget does go to education and to healthcare. Just a few other things that are in the budget. So schools had not been fully funded in that QBE formula, the Quality Basic Education Act formula, and now they're being fully funded, which they still aren't truly fully funding, but we are glad to have that formula, which was created in the 80s, fully funded. There's going to be the first cost of living increase for state retirees. They haven't had one in 14 years. And I've heard from several constituents about that over the years. So I'm very happy about that. Last year we increased Medicaid postpartum coverage from 3 months to 6 months. In this budget, it'll go from 6 months to 12 months. So those are some of the highlights. The governor also has in his budget a $1.6 billion tax return, $250 to single filers, $500 to joint married filers. And, of course, everyone likes to give tax refunds, but most of us in the Democratic caucus are of the mind that at least that should perhaps be based on income, and there are other things we can do. This budget does not expand Medicaid. Medicaid could expand for $239 million, cover 500,000 uninsured Georgians, and bring in billions of dollars in federal aid. And so our tax dollars are going to support other people in Medicaid, but not here in Georgia, unfortunately. I'm going to, and then I'm just going to say really quick on local redistricting. Thank you all for being so active in your community. Dekalb is going to have a nighttime public hearing on our BOE, our Board of Education and Board of Commissioners maps. They're not changing, well, at least on the House side, what we're presenting is they're not changing that much. They're just proportional to census increases and everything. But Senator Parent may have some things to add on the Senate side. I'm not up to date on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Senator Parent now.
Okay. Thank you, Becky. Good evening, everyone. It's so wonderful to see all of you and so many familiar faces. Thanks for everything you do, and thank you for having us. And thank you for your encouragement and involvement as a church group. I think that really matters. Since Becky was just talking about local redistricting, I'll just briefly touch on that. Right now, where we are in the Senate delegation is that the chair of the Senate delegation, Emmanuel Jones, is interested in moving forward to eliminate the 2 super districts on the Dekalb County Commission and create 7 equal-sized districts. And so today he presented the Senate delegation with a draft map that would do that. And then we did that in an executive session. And so then right after that, he gave it to the press and to the some of the government relations folks for Dekalb County. And he has committed that he definitely would want to have an open process and a discussion about whether that's the best course forward to make that change. That change would require a referendum. The super districts were put into place in 1992, and it is the type of change to the County Organizational Act that would require a public referendum. I personally could make a pro or con case probably either way, so I look forward to listening to what everyone has to say. I will say that a change that major under this timetable, I have some concerns about that. I also have more significant concerns about the fact that we are supposed to be having a charter review commission right now in Dekalb County. CEO Michael Thurman came down to the state capitol a couple of years ago after years of discussion and much fanfare during this press conference he held. It was really like a proclamation signing because the CEO decided that, instead of us passing a bill to create the charter review commission of the organizational act, that he would do it himself. And so we had sort of like a ceremonial proclamation signing. It just had begun when COVID happened, and then basically it has not happened at all. And I am of the firm opinion that needs to happen. There has not been a organizational act charter review done in Dekalb County since 1979. And the current organizational act was put into place in 1981. That is, and Mary Margaret, you might be the best at remembering this, although I'm sure Bee and Mary and Becky know as well. I believe that is the organizational act that created the CEO form of government in Dekalb County. Mm-hmm. Now, we have amended the organizational act a number of times over the years, in fact, many times. The super districts themselves were put into place in 1992. via referendum. But we have not done a comprehensive review, and I firmly believe it's needed. And frankly, am not inclined to support a change that major without going through that process, a change that major to the commission districts without going through that process. We do have to redistrict this year, but we could theoretically come back after a charter review commission. And if that's a recommendation made, after the public gets a chance to weigh in on pros and cons and all that, we of course could do that at that time. Would not be our only opportunity. So that is a big point of contention currently within various communities about whether that eliminating those two super districts is the right way to go. I am real quick on another bill Becky mentioned. We on the Senate floor on Monday, we do have the bill that would expand the postpartum Medicaid coverage to a year. And of course, as she mentioned, it is already in the governor's budget. So that is a positive. Some other not so positive things are currently moving. This one, it's debatable probably for this group, whether it's positive, but I'll mention it because it has gotten some coverage. We have a bill on Monday that would do a statue memorial for Clarence Thomas on Capitol grounds. The bill that I have been most consumed by in the last few days is the permitless weapons carry bill that just passed out of Senate Judiciary Committee on a party line vote 2 days ago after a long debate. What amazes me is that guns is one of the areas where, to my mind, a sort of right-wing alternative facts narrative took hold before we really got into the whole narrative on the big lie and the Trump. You know, it's sort of like was already one of those things where like smoking causing cancer and climate change, where many people on the right wing side of our public really seem to somehow, to me, it's inexplicable, maybe one of you could educate me, seem to somehow actually believe that more guns leads to less crime and that more people owning guns saves lives. This has been disproven over and over again. And as a matter of fact, you can just sort of open your eyes and look around and see that that's not true. And you can look at America versus other countries, and it is abundantly clear that that is not true. But there they were in committee. Well, it's been proven over and over again that more guns lead to less crime. And you're supposed to only ask questions. Some of this was coming out under questioning I was doing about data. And I couldn't let it go. And I was like, I'm sorry, you are not entitled to your own facts on this. Like, you're just not. And another interesting fact is that, so when you're talking about eliminating the weapons carry license background check, right now we don't have universal background checks in Georgia, right? So like a gun seller would have it, a background checks, but private sales, gun shows, and the like do not do background checks. So this is one of the very few checks built into the system. In fact, really the only one if you are buying through one of those other venues. And last year, I got data from the Council of Probate Court Judges, because they're the ones who have to issue the weapons carry licenses at the county level, that 5,000 people, and that's a low number because counties aren't required to report under the law, 5,000 people were denied the weapons carry license. And that is due to criminal history. So I said to them, would we make it easier? Because a lot of times they talk about like good guys with guns and bad guys with guns. Y'all know the narrative. So my question is, here you're actually giving the gun to bad guys. You're removing a check on bad guys. If 5,000 criminals were denied it, those people are not entitled under the law to carry a weapon. Unfortunately, this is where some of the very fraught politics on the Republican side of the aisle and Governor Kemp's primary challenge by former Senator Perdue are having very real and very negative implications for those of us here. Probably all of you heard about the 6-month-old baby that died by a stray bullet just the other week, and the British astrophysicist who just was killed in an apartment in Brookhaven by stray gunfire. And I asked, how does this bill make these people safer? But it was party line. I know that there are a couple people on the committee who don't love it, but with Kemp so strongly getting behind it after sort of not letting it happen really, or not calling for it, it's due to the primary challenge. And I know that Representative Nguyen is going to get into some of these, education bills that she and I are both on ed. I think Representative Evans is too, that we are really contending with. So she's going to talk some about that. But it really is interesting because all these education bills are cultural wedge issues, very divisive, manufactured crises, right? Like this permitless thing is stupid. It's not that onerous to get a permit, but it's these cultural wedge issues that they are trying to blow up into some huge thing to drive out their base. And so particularly with these ed bills about what can be taught and what can't, so Representative Evans mentioned, we're giving the teachers the last $2,000 of the promised $5,000 pay raise. But when you read these bills, they are rife with new requirements for teachers, micromanaging what they can and can't do, pulling funding if they accidentally talk about a divisive concept. And teachers are already leaving the profession in droves. I can't fathom how they think that giving teachers $2,000 and yet treating them like they are third graders can end up comporting well. I'm supposed to, though, not talk about that. I am going to talk really briefly before we get to Representative Nguyen about the earned income tax credit bill. That is, so you can do EITC, which I've been a sponsor of for many years, and we have on the federal level, and we're one of the few states that does not have it at the state level. And real briefly, for those that don't know what it is, it's earned income tax credit is what EITC stands for. And some people call it a work tax credit. And it has been proven to be a very, very effective anti-poverty tool because it's essentially, it's not like it is money that people get if it's refundable, which I'll explain more about in a moment. But it's basically an incentive for people that are really on the margins of work. It's extra money that would help them stay invested in working. You only get it if you're working. And for a lot of folks in these low wage jobs, whether or not it's actually worth it to work, we have people even at the state that make little enough that they are on food stamps. And there are many private industries where that is the same thing. And so for some of these folks, a lot of these folks that are really right there on the bubble of whether working is even worth it, like because you would get some money if you didn't work at all, right? This is a huge, huge chance to really reward that work, incentivize climbing the economic ladder and staying engaged in the economy. And not only that, it makes a huge difference. That amount of money, it's like going to be like $300, makes a huge difference for these families that are more on the margin. And the research shows that for states where EITC is in effect, it has a huge ripple effect throughout the family. The kids do better in school. The family is healthier. I mean, and it really goes on and on. There's like 6 societal and family implication outcomes that are proven to be better when the family is given this bit of support. So it could be refundable or not refundable. If it's refundable, what that means is you get it even if your state tax liability is 0. And for many people, their state tax liability is 0. And that's because they make so little, right? Our Republicans have balked more at the idea of people getting it, even if their state tax liability is 0, right? Then they view it a little bit more as a handout. If it's non-refundable, then it means that you only get it to the extent you actually owe state income taxes. So the former is actually a lot more effective at implementing the goals of the program. But there's a little bit more of an ideological blockade on that from our Republican colleagues. but it has been, I mean, Paul Ryan was one of the big boosters of, I recall the federal one, or, you know, it was actually conceived of, I think, by Republicans as a sort of alternative to help the working poor, to actually sort of like more direct cash welfare payments. There's interest in it. One of the things in the federal bill, it can be used. I'm sorry, the federal ARPA or COVID funds. No, it's probably just the ARPA can be used for this purpose in particular. Our Senate Finance Chairman, Chuck Hufstetler, who does a great job and is a sort of non-Trump Republican, he's a big booster of it, but you know, we haven't gotten enough of their folks to go along with it yet, but I think it will happen someday. So yes. Oh yeah. So Representative Nguyen just weighed in on the chat. Yes, that's exactly right. The EITC was passed under the Republicans and has been shown to be an extremely successful anti-poverty measure. All right. So instead of typing in the chat, Representative Nguyen, please come on camera and talk about all the exciting things you're going to talk about.
Thanks, Senator. Thank you so much for having me on this call. You know, my colleagues have already highlighted some of the things that are going on this legislative session, and I have to say, has been an extremely busy, fast-paced legislative session, and there are a lot of contentious issues on the table. Something that I want to spend my time talking about is education. And Senator Parent mentioned this, and I think Representative Evans mentioned this also. While we do think it is important to fulfill the promise of the teacher pay raises, it's simply not enough. In addition to ensuring that we are fully funding our QBE formula, which the governor has promised to do, we really have to think about the fact that public education budget has been cut over the number of years, including a couple legislative sessions ago. We cut the budget by $1 billion. We've only fully funded QBE in the last, we have not fully funded QBE in the last 11 of 14 years. And so we're talking about compounding cuts. And not only that, the formula hasn't been updated, and we are not fully funding our public education, our public transportation formula. We have not addressed the counselor to student ratio, which needs to change. We are not addressing the nurses to student ratio. On top of that, there are a number of voucher bills on the table that would further erode the strength of our public school system. And then what I think is probably on the top of many people's minds are these 3 divisive education bills that are aimed to censor what educators are able to teach in the classroom. There are 2 bills that have been dropped on the House side, 1 on the Senate side. They all are a little bit different in nature, but the premise of the bills are to restrict the student's ability to have an honest and truthful education. One of the bills, House Bill 888, goes as far as to say that educators are not allowed to talk about public policy, period, in the classroom, which is essentially everything. That means it will be very challenging to talk about government, to talk about history, to talk about science, to talk about health. Everything that touches our lives is a public policy decision, and certainly with everything that is going on in Georgia and across the country, it is really important to engage students on public policy and why they should, really think about their role and how to empower them to participate in our government, because all of those decisions impact their future. I mean, we're in a position where vaccines are now a public policy issue. We're in a position where climate change is being questioned as to whether or not it's real. So all of these things are really pertinent to our students. The other piece of it is it creates a chilling effect in the classroom. The bills are written in such a way that enable educators to talk about history in some form. So to talk about the history of slavery or to talk about the Holocaust. And I imagine in the future, our history books will talk about January 6th and what happened at the Capitol. But what is required of our educators is to present these issues and these instances in a neutral way. And so it is pushing educators to say that there are both sides to slavery, and we know that is not in fact true. And so it really is the whitewashing of history. It is preventing us from really having a deep and honest dive of why it's important to talk about history in a whole and honest way. If we don't do it in a whole and honest way, it does not enable us to have reconciliation. I mean, truth is part of reconciliation, and it will prohibit us from being in a position where we make commitments not to repeat what we have done in the past. Now, the punitive natures vary. So in one of the House Bills 888, if an educator is found in violation of this, then that particular school or that school district will lose 20% of their QBE funding, which is a really punitive measure to employ. And not only that, there is an ability of a student who is 18 years or older, a parent, or the district attorney to sue the educator. That is the chilling effect it will have. And Senator Parent already mentioned this, but we have a teacher shortage, which has been compounded under the pandemic. And this is not going to help us recruit or retain educators in the classroom. The other version of the CRT bill, House Bill 1084, doesn't have the punitive nature of reducing the QBE funding, but what it would do would be enabling the State Board of Education to take away some waivers, school waivers. And so, for instance, if you are attending a public school who has applied and received a waiver that doesn't require them to meet specific classroom sizes because they're unable to, they could punitively take away these waivers that are in place. So another form of punishment that is not tied to the education formula, but would be tied to the ability of these schools to effectively serve the student body. And then the bill on the Senate side actually even would include some of those measures into higher education. So we're not looking at just K through 12. The Senate version would impact our higher education system. So really dangerous bills, has nothing to do with serving our students or supporting our teachers, a divisive red meat issue that will certainly be on the table. We know we will probably see some form passed or the other. And I think it's really important to talk about keeping students front and center in this conversation. I met with some APS students last week and they said, is this a joke? We feel really scared. This is important to us as students, and learning about history has empowered them to be more empathetic, has empowered them to be more engaged with their community. And the other thing they brought up was whose feelings are they trying to protect? Which students' feelings are they trying to protect? Not our feeling. In conjunction with that, book banning. So it's a 1-2 punch of censorship, of restricting this whole and honest education that students deserve in the state of Georgia. The second thing I'll just briefly touch on is local redistricting is happening. And this is a very wonky issue, but we are seeing some unprecedented moves in our Georgia General Assembly. Typically, should happen is our local delegations control the redistricting process within their own counties and within their school boards. What we're seeing instead is 1 or 2 Republicans who represent Cobb County, who represent Gwinnett County, who represent Richmond County, who represent Fulton County. They are circumventing the local process. The local process is a partnership between the delegation members at the General Assembly and between our local commissioners and our local school boards. The premise of local control is to reflect the will of the people who are being represented by those folks at home. And what we're seeing instead is 1 or 2 Republicans circumventing the process, introducing their own maps and pushing them through the General Assembly unilaterally. The latest example was Gwinnett County today. The Gwinnett County delegation is comprised of majority Democrats. 12 of the Democratic members worked with all 5 commissioners, unanimously had the consent of the commissioners to pass a local redistricting map in Gwinnett. When it came to committee, 1 Republican hijacked that map, dropped her own substitute version in it, and created a majority white voting age district in Gwinnett, which is 65% people of color, and it passed out on the House floor today. And I think why I want to talk about that is because we're seeing all kinds of efforts to install minority rule. It is using the rules at hand, manipulating the process, and silencing the voice of the majority. And it goes exactly hand in hand to what we're seeing as it relates to our democracy. So this is just another way, in addition to partisan gerrymandering, in addition to all the voter restriction bills, all the subversion, this is just another component of it. And then the last thing I'll mention is today on the House floor, because Senator Parent mentioned this, around the constitutional carry or the guns everywhere, there was a gun reciprocity bill passed out on the House floor today that enables anybody who carries in another state to be able to bring their firearms into the state of Georgia without going, and it even allows states that have gun laws for those people to come into the state of Georgia with their firearms without having to go through the process here in Georgia. It's a reciprocity interstate related. And I'm sure Rep. Oliver will talk about it. She brought some very good points up on the House floor today, but it passed out of the House today. So those are some of the things that are happening at the General Assembly. And I will turn it back over. I think Rep. Oliver had some remaining time. And then
Let me just follow up a little bit on the stupid gun bills that are coming before the House and the Senate, and really are kind of breathtaking. Not only did a bad bill pass today that said more guns, more places, more people, we don't care if you're a criminal. I mean, that's my biased view of what happened today. The bill was so totally misrepresented in its presentation that I had to get up and make a kind of a fit. And the benefit of the doubt sometimes I'll try to give to my colleagues is that they really didn't understand what they were saying. But the confusion over this bill today and the fact that it still passed when they really didn't know what it said is very disheartening. In the beginning of my career, you really had a bipartisan discussion about gun safety. It was never something that was going to be equal conversation. It wasn't going to create greater gun safety bills, but it was a fair bipartisan discussion. The no facts, no deviation from party messaging is more severe in the gun safety issues than in any other area. And this political year, unprecedented political year, the messaging, the no facts, the partisan stuff is going to be particularly painful. In that context, as I begin my discussion about House Bill 1013, mental health bill, I frequently start by saying, this is a bipartisan bill that is not about message, is not about making a point, and is not about paying attention to me. This is a bill that is about helping Georgians who are in crisis in a significant way. We know that Georgia's mental health system is at the bottom of per capita funding. It may be 50, it may be 48, but it's at the bottom. We know that suicide is up, particularly in rural areas. We know that substance abuse overdoses are up, 24% deaths. And we know that there are desperate families across Georgia who cannot get help. Speaker Alston has put his name as #1 signer on this bill, which is very unusual. And he appointed a Republican and me, a Democrat, to serve as what he calls co-pilots. It's a 74-page bill. Let me interrupt myself now and say all of this is available to you online. If you want to go look at the dumb critical race theory bill 888, or if you want to go look at the intelligent and deep dive into mental health reform in 1013, or if you want to look at the ridiculous thing we passed today, which was, I think, Senate Bill, I forget what maybe 18, all of that's available to you online. As is, you're invited again to take my newsletter where I ask people how they vote on things. That's if you go to marymargaretoliver.org, you can sign up. Many of you take the newsletter, and many of you follow me on Facebook, which I have something that looks like a regular diary. Back to the mental health bill, I'm excited. And I said to the speaker, and I've said publicly, it's a privilege to work on something that's substantive, is going to help people. The issues of parity, illness, of mental illness being treated the same as physical illness, is very, very topical right now. And there's been a fast-moving ball of the changes of case law and changes of federal policy, some of which came out during the end of the Trump administration, and the insurance industry is not in compliance with the updates. So there's a significant effort in this bill to make parity a reality. Many other parts of the bill are also about enforcing entitlements, children with special needs in schools, children in Babies Can't Wait. Those are entitlement programs that we're not enforcing. EPSDT, early periodic screening diagnostic testing. The bill expands coverage for people in crisis in relation to two different programs, what we're calling co-responder programs and assisted outpatient treatment programs, trying to get more intensive service over people who are coming out of crisis and are circling through our ERs and need effective treatment. It's going to be an interesting process. And this bill came to the floor, came to David Ralston, came to the creation in House Bill 1013 through the Behavioral Health Commission. So it was developed not really by legislators, but by substantive subcommittee issue experts. And I'm pleased with the opportunity to work on something that will help Georgians. Isn't about message. And I've been working on it since May, and we have tied in a lot of conversations with the governor on his budget, where he does have money, to make sure that as we set forth new policies and new provisions, that they're funded. So is it time to turn to questions, Becky?
Yes, and I wanted just to, we tried to keep track of the questions that Susan Pinson sent us. I do want to just add in on a little bit of other good news. There is a lot that is very challenging about this session. You heard a lot about that, but you have heard about this good news about this mental health bipartisan bill. And I do want you all to know, we do sign other bills. Like yesterday we signed a teacher pipeline bill that would allow retired teachers to come back if they want. And after a year, they can come back and work. And the way the law was written before, they wouldn't have been fairly compensated at all. And this will allow that to happen. And then we passed two healthcare bills today. And one of them really, I do think will help. It's for patients that are on very expensive medications. Sometimes drug companies give a rebate, and then the patient pays, a co-payment. Well, right now the patient often pays the co-payment off of this really expensive price, and the rebate goes to the insurance company. And now with this bill, it'll be the high price that, minus the rebate, and then the patient pays the copay off that true price, that lower price. So we do pass every day, we pass bipartisan small bills, but this mental health bill is a huge, step in the right direction. And so I did want to say that. And then I'm trying to think on these outstanding questions that were submitted. I think we pretty much covered them. Why don't we take questions from the Glenn audience?
So can I hop in for 1 second? My wonderful in-laws have decided to pay a visit, and they are here in my house. So I might have to seek everyone's indulgence to hop off. Now, luckily, you have 3 amazing, talented legislators who I know can field all questions, but I'm going to drop all my contact info in the chat. Just so grateful for all of you, and apologies about my early departure. Let me know what I can do for all of you, and very grateful to my brilliant colleagues.
Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. All right, who has questions? I know this group too well to think that there are no questions.
Oh, could I-
I have a personal question.
You're muted, Carolyn.
Okay,
Wait, you're muted again.
now,
There you go.
there's signs all over my neighborhood, which is Sagamore Hills, about moving our high school students to Druid Hills, which is quite a long way through a lot of traffic, and Lakeside is like around the corner. Is that kind of stuff happening?
I'll address that. Thank you so much for your question. That is actually that, we're state representatives, so that really is a DeKalb school board issue. So
Okay.
I'm sorry that I can't fully address what's going on there.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah. And I will say in the original questions submitted, there was a question about voting, and it was basically, do we see any other voting changes this session? And from what I've been hearing, I don't think we'll have any other voting bills come forward. And just so you know, there's a bill out there to repeal the big, huge, bad election law bill we passed last year. That's a Senate Bill 202, which, really put up very many barriers to voting. But, that repeal's not going to go anywhere, but it's just kind of like an act of to be on the record that we think we should repeal it. But
I can also
yeah,
jump in
Representative,
on
do
the
you want to
voting.
speak anything about voting? Because so there was an initial question about that.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple different things on the voting front. So one is we are seeing this big push to create new cities. Specifically in Cobb County, there are 4 cityhood bills. And the way these bills are structured, they are asking for a May referendum ballot to the voters. And the Cobb County Board of Elections has already stated that they are underwater right now. They have to address the fact that we are redistricting. We already passed our state level maps, but we are redistricting at the local level, which requires all of our local election boards to prepare for any precinct changes. And now asking them to prepare and put these voter referendum items on the May ballot is a huge concern. Our local election boards are all underwater currently. And so that has come up a number of times, but it's not really seeming to, the folks who are pushing these bills with the May referendum, they are not really responding to the needs of the local election boards. Second, there has been one already, a bill that has been introduced. I will say it is not as bad as the original iteration, which in the original iteration of this bill, it did require every single precinct in the state of Georgia to have 3 poll monitors at the closure of the precinct from each political party. That's over 2,400 precincts and an impossible task to achieve. As somebody who has done poll monitoring, as somebody who has done voter protection with the Democratic Party, we have trouble staffing even just the Metro Atlanta precincts with poll watchers. We were able to get rid of that provision, but what the bill also does, it requires new laws around the chain of custody for security paper. We will now be using new security paper, watermark paper for our ballots. And it now puts these requirements that are going to be onerous on our local election boards. As I stated before, they are all underwater. And with this new Senate Bill 202, what currently is happening is that bill enables unlimited voter challenges. And so every single Fulton County election boards, there are folks who are challenging the eligibility of hundreds of voters. And their election administration staff, they are now having to do the work of vetting all of these voter challenges. In addition to that, we already have seen the implications of Senate Bill 202 as it pertains to the restrictions around vote by mail and the restrictions around not enabling voters to have access to secure drop boxes in the same manner. There was an analysis done that captured what happened with our 2021 municipal elections, and voters in Georgia are now 45 times more likely to have their ballots rejected. We're also seeing the implications of what happened with some of these local bills that were passed pretty quietly through last legislative session. There were a handful of counties who reconstituted their entire local election boards, and that enabled them to remove and replace these local election officials. So for instance, Spalding County, they reconstituted their local election board, removed some of the folks. They now have a QAnon conspiracy theorist running that local election board, and they already made the decision to eliminate Sunday voting. So what we will likely see as it pertains to anything election related is it's probably not going to be a massive bill in the form of 202. It's probably not going to be anything as obvious as Senate Bill 202. But what we will see is probably legislation that further perpetuates the big lie and further adds burdens to our local election systems without merit. So they're going to be harder to see. It's not going to create the same type of emotional reaction as criminalizing handing out a bottle of water, but they work in tandem to just put pressure on the local election boards and make it harder in general to have a functioning system. And so that is what's going on with voting. And I see Mary Margaret raising her hand. So I'll just let her go.
Bee needs to be Secretary of State because there are about 4 other people in the floor of the House that understand all this. And so we need somebody like her there. Before we leave, I think we cut off at 7. I just want to tell you that all of us I'm trying to put my contact information in the chat. My email is mmolaw.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter at marymargaretoliver.org. It's sad that we don't have people coming to the Capitol as much during COVID. It's necessary, but it's sad. But the building is open, and all of our hearings, all of our floor debates, all of it is online. You can watch us all day long in one committee or another. And many of you are very, very interested. I appreciate your interest, and I'm always looking for ways to help people participate. Becky, are we wrapping up? Is there one other question?
Yeah, Frank wanted to ask for us to get back to questions, so I wanted to ask him if he had a question. And in light of what we were, learning from Representative Nguyen, I do want to encourage all of us to, if you have any friends or neighbors or family members that would like to work as nonpartisan people with the Capitol elections, or even in Fulton County or another county, that would really be wonderful. One of the things that happened in Senate Bill 202 is that they prohibited outside organizations from helping elections boards. And one reason November 2020 went so well in Fulton is because they did have outside businesses helping them. Like, they used I don't know if it was Mercedes-Benz state, but they used a big facility like that for voting for Fulton. So anyhow, please do consider, if you can, to volunteer as an election worker, or to encourage people in the community. And there is, at the same time tonight, 2 of the commissioners are hosting a town hall to meet Dekalb's new election director. So we're missing that, but I'm looking forward to meeting this person and really helping Dekalb have safe elections with excellent turnout. And we will all be working on our messaging to be very clear about how to get out and vote. So you will be getting that from these representatives. Yes. Okay. Yes, I see. Criminal legal reform. Anyone interested in Georgia legislation impact the lives of those in criminal, please join a coalition. When is
I will, that was just an informational thing. This is Amy Ard. Hi.
Hey,
So
Amy.
for folks who are interested in bills before the Georgia legislature this year that are in criminal legal reform issues. Encourage you every Tuesday. We have Talk Justice Tuesdays. You can find more about it on that website. But I also wanted to highlight the governor's budget that closes 2 prisons but has money to build 5 more, and highly encourage our legislators to bring that up as a real issue. The Georgia prison system is deplorable. We are currently under the Justice Department investigation for the treatment of people that are being held in prisons, and we have no business building 5 more. So that's and I implore you to speak out against that in the budget.
Yes, thank you so much, Amy. And I know I've gotten some emails about that. And I do not know the prison system as well as it sounds like you do. And I would say, Representative Oliver, do you have anything to add about that?
The time of private prisons is kind of come and gone. Profitability of that is so that they're not as interested in. But the real issue is, how do you maintain a prison? And it's a mathematical calculation as to whether you build a new one with modern technology and modern oversight opportunities with modern staffing, or do you renovate the old prison? The Metro Atlanta prison down there near Confederate Lake was abandoned, kind of built in the 70s, I think. Was abandoned. Women prisoners were moved to Alto, which is a public health hospital from 1920 that's been renovated as a quote unquote modern prison. And we've spent $40 million to renovate, to bring Metro Atlanta prison back online. And that's because it was abandoned. So we're abandoning old facilities, we're building new facilities, and the prison population is falling. I think that the new prison effort is, Amy, in part because they're really fearful of the Justice Department investigation, which is ongoing based on conditions in the prison. One of the issues, there are many, about the deplorable management of the system is the physical plants. And if I were in charge of trying to house 40,000 prisoners, I might rather spend the money on new facility than old facility too. It's a terrible problem to try to manage, and we are very, very much at a bad spot right now. And if the Justice Department successfully finalizes this investigation of prison conditions, we will be, this is unfortunately a prediction, and I hope I'm wrong, we'll be spending another $1 billion on new construction to try to modernize and upgrade and make them more manageable.
I would say that there's a third option, which is to provide resources that decarcerate people and offer more supportive services in community.
The criminal justice reform reduced and COVID reduced the prison population from about 56,000 down to about 42,000. So the savings from that, now part of that is jail backlog, part of that is COVID. But prior to COVID, we had reduced the prison population by over 10%, which creates other management problems. As you take the quote nonviolent folks out of prison and you leave the more violent offenders there who are going to serve longer terms, then you have a different set of management issues. Reducing mass incarceration was the biggest mistake made in the 20th century. And we are correcting that by reducing population. The question is, in this era of real public safety discussion, how fast you reduce it and how do you replace programmatical reforms. Replacing programmatical reforms with building new prisons is a process that's going to take some time.
And Amy, I also want to say, I specifically don't know about all the details about the prisons, but I absolutely agree with you. And I have done a lot of I am working on issues of like getting restorative justice out into the public sphere. The state has made some progress with drug, accountability courts, and we need to do more and more of that. We are absolutely agree that we need to do more on the preventative side, rather than just build more prisons. But one thing for restorative, one tiny little positive example is I'm on the Dekalb Juvenile Justice Board, and there's a lot of good work going on out there about working in the community to try to prevent, to really help kids before they get into into trouble. But anyhow, we're looking at piloting a program for restorative justice in the 2 middle schools that have the highest number of referrals into the juvenile justice system. So I am committed on working on this issue, but I don't specifically know about prisons a lot. And I do know we got like in the summer, there are prisons with like no air conditioning. There are prisons with, which is unbelievable. So I don't know about these 4 prisons that they say they're going to replace, but I imagine those are the ones they're going to replace.
We have a 90% turnover in staffing at the DJJ and a 49% turnover in Department of Corrections. So you're in charge of corrections. You have a 49% staffing turnover, and you've got a building and a death rate that is, I think the Justice Department is going to cite us. I think they're going to take over. I think it's going to cost us $1 billion. That's bad news. All that's bad. All that's bad.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. I would encourage you, there's a Raise the Age bill that is coming up this year. So please invest in that.
Oliver is the truest champion of that. We all are, but she's worked hard for years.
It's passed the House. It's in the Senate. The sheriffs, rural sheriffs are stopping it. Raise the Age has been a priority for 10 years.
Yeah. And there's another bill on specifically for women, incarcerated pregnant women, that would divert pregnant women to who come into jails, divert them and delay sentencing for 6 weeks postpartum. So I encourage.
I think I'm a co-sponsor of that, aren't you?
I think you just became one. Thank you.
Great.
Amy, I was hoping I had dropped a bill to severely restrict the use of solitary confinement.
Yes.
Would actually like to see it eliminated altogether, but the conversations we had around it were putting severe restrictions around specifically vulnerable populations. And I was hoping that after we experienced lockdown and saw that many of us who are not incarcerated and still had to severely restrict who we were interacting with during the pandemic, it would galvanize people to be a little bit more sympathetic to the notion that people who are incarcerated are thrown into a hole, and that it has severe, long sustaining post-traumatic stress, but it really hasn't gotten any traction. But that is something that I think that we need to get rid of.
Well, thank you so much for all of you who were here to make this presentation to us this evening. It's been incredibly helpful. And if nothing else, we've certainly learned that this is a really important year for us to be paying attention to what's happening in the Georgia legislature. There's a lot of things that we care about that are being discussed, and many of them pushed through without really hearing the people in the state want. So it's important that we pay attention this year. In addition to the Justice Tuesdays that Amy talked about, which is a really great place to keep up with all this legislation, I'd also like to let you know about Faith in Public Life, which is a national organization and a state level and national organization that tries to bring to move toward justice at the state, local, and federal levels. And during the Georgia legislative session, they have weekly updates on bills that people of faith might particularly care about. So that's another good resource, in addition to all the great contact information that you all have given us this evening. So again, thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's been really helpful, somewhat disheartening, but encouraging us to get out and make sure that we're saying what we need to say and making our voices heard. So thank you again. We're grateful for the time that you spent with us.
Thank you so much. Good night, Glenn family.